Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Construction of knowledge in discourse analysis. Interactive assistant construction of knowledge refers to how individuals and groups create, communicate, and negotiate meanings and understandings in social interactions. In discourse analysis, this process is examined by analyzing how language shapes the way knowledge is produced, validated, and shared. Discourse analysis focuses on how knowledge is not just passively transmitted but actively constructed through communication, social practices, power dynamics, and cultural contexts. It reveals the ways in which discourse helps define what is accepted as legitimate knowledge and who has the authority to produce and disseminate that knowledge. Through discourse analysis, researchers explore how knowledge construction happens in various settings, including education, scientific communities, media, political institutions, and everyday conversations. This approach sheds light on how discourse both reflects and reinforces social hierarchies, power structures, and cultural values in the process of knowledge production. Key features of knowledge construction in discourse analysis. 1. Discursive practices in knowledge production. Discursive practices refer to the ways language is used to create and communicate knowledge within specific social and institutional contexts. Discourse analysis explores how different forms of knowledge are produced through structured interactions and the norms governing those interactions. Example: in a classroom setting, a teacher might use formal academic language, such as, according to this theory, X causes Y, to present scientific knowledge. Discourse analysis would investigate how this formal, authoritative style of communication positions the teacher as a knowledge authority and how students' understanding is shaped by accepting this framework. 2. Power relations and the validation of knowledge. Power relations play a crucial role in the construction of knowledge. Discourse analysis examines how certain individuals or institutions are given the authority to produce knowledge, while others are marginalized or excluded. This dynamic often determines whose knowledge is considered valid or credible. Example: in a medical setting, doctors might be viewed as the primary source of medical knowledge, with patients' personal experiences treated as secondary or anecdotal. Discourse analysis would explore how language constructs the doctor's authority, such as through the use of technical jargon, and how it might undermine patients' experiential knowledge in healthcare interactions. 3. Negotiation of meaning. In many discourses, the construction of knowledge involves the negotiation of meaning, where different perspectives, ideas, or interpretations are discussed and debated. Discourse analysis focuses on how these negotiations unfold and how consensus or conflict is managed in knowledge production. Example: in a group discussion about climate change, one person might argue, "The science is clear. Human activity is driving climate change," while another might respond, "But we don't know all the variables yet." Discourse analysis would examine how language is used to assert authority, challenge assumptions, and negotiate the dominant narrative about climate change. 4. Intertextuality and knowledge networks. Intertextuality refers to the way texts, spoken or written, reference or build upon other texts. Discourse analysis investigates how knowledge is constructed through intertextual references, where ideas, theories, or facts are linked to previous knowledge to build a larger network of understanding. Example: in academic writing, authors frequently cite other scholars to support their claims. As Smith, 2005, argues, this phenomenon is best understood through X framework. Discourse analysis would explore how intertextuality creates a chain of knowledge production, reinforcing certain ideas while excluding others. It would also focus on how this citation practice builds authority and positions the author within a scholarly community. 5. Framing and representation of knowledge. Framing refers to how knowledge is presented or packaged in ways that shape how it is understood. Discourse analysis looks at how certain frames highlight specific aspects of knowledge while downplaying or ignoring others, influencing what is considered important or true. Example: a news report on economic inequality might frame the issue by focusing on individual responsibility for financial success or failure, rather than systemic factors like discrimination or access to education. Discourse analysis would examine how this framing constructs knowledge about inequality and reinforces or challenges dominant ideologies. 6. Cultural and social context in knowledge construction. The construction of knowledge is heavily influenced by the cultural and social context in which discourse takes place. Discourse analysis explores how language reflects the values, norms, and assumptions of a particular culture or society, shaping what knowledge is considered legitimate and who can produce it. Example: in a traditional education system, knowledge might be constructed around the idea that teachers are the primary source of information, and students are passive recipients. Discourse analysis would explore how this dynamic reflects broader cultural assumptions about authority, expertise, and the role of education. 7. Knowledge as a social practice. Knowledge is not only constructed through formal discourse but also through everyday social practices. Discourse analysis examines how knowledge is embedded in social actions and interactions, revealing how people use language to construct practical, everyday knowledge. Example: in workplace settings, knowledge about how to complete tasks is often constructed informally through conversations between colleagues, such as, "This is how we usually handle this situation." Discourse analysis would explore how these informal discourses construct knowledge that is practical and context-specific, differing from formalized training or manuals. Methods for analyzing the construction of knowledge in discourse. 1. Critical discourse analysis, CDA. Critical discourse analysis, CDA, is commonly used to study the construction of knowledge, focusing on how language reflects and reinforces power structures, ideologies, and social inequalities in the production of knowledge. CDA looks at how dominant discourses shape what is accepted as legitimate knowledge. Example: a CDA of educational textbooks might reveal how certain historical narratives are framed in ways that reflect nationalistic ideologies, marginalizing alternative perspectives. The analysis would explore how language constructs knowledge about history and whose voices are prioritized or excluded. 2. Intertextual analysis. Intertextual analysis focuses on how texts refer to or build upon other texts, constructing knowledge through connections with previous discourses. This method is useful for studying how academic, scientific, or political knowledge is constructed through citation, reference, and the repetition of key ideas. Example: intertextual analysis of a legal judgment might explore how the judge references previous cases and legal precedents to construct a new interpretation of the law. The analysis would focus on how the interconnectedness of these texts creates a body of legal knowledge that evolves over time. 3. Framing analysis. Framing analysis examines how the presentation of information shapes the way knowledge is understood. This method looks at how certain frames highlight specific interpretations of events or ideas while downplaying others, constructing a particular version of reality. Example: in public health campaigns, framing analysis might explore how messages about smoking cessation frame smoking as a personal choice or as a public health crisis. Discourse analysis would focus on how these frames construct knowledge about smoking and its consequences, influencing public perceptions and policy decisions. 4. Ethnographic discourse analysis. Ethnographic discourse analysis combines discourse analysis with ethnographic observation to study how knowledge is constructed in specific social and cultural contexts. This method is useful for exploring how everyday language practices contribute to the construction of practical knowledge. Example: ethnographic discourse analysis in a medical setting might examine how nurses construct knowledge about patient care through informal conversations during shift changes. The analysis would focus on how this practical, situated knowledge is shared and how it complements or contrasts with formal medical knowledge. Examples of knowledge construction in discourse analysis. Example 1. Knowledge construction in scientific discourse. In scientific papers, researchers often construct knowledge through hypotheses and evidence-based reasoning. Discourse analysis of a research article might examine how the author uses language like, "the data suggests," or "our findings indicate," to construct new knowledge, while also referencing prior studies to legitimize these claims. The analysis would explore how the discourse positions the research within the broader scientific community and reinforces the authority of empirical evidence. Example 2. Educational knowledge and classroom talk. In a classroom, teachers and students co-construct knowledge through dialogue. Discourse analysis of classroom interactions might reveal how a teacher's use of questions like, "What do you think this means?" encourages students to actively participate in the knowledge construction process. The analysis would explore how students' contributions are validated or challenged, shaping their understanding of the subject matter. Example 3. Media framing of social issues. News media often construct knowledge about social issues through framing. Discourse analysis of news coverage on immigration might reveal how the issue is framed in terms of security threats or economic contributions. The analysis would focus on how these frames construct public knowledge about immigration, influencing opinions and policy discussions. Example 4. Knowledge construction in workplace training. In workplace training, knowledge is often constructed through formal and informal discourses. Discourse analysis of a training session might explore how the trainer uses language like, "This is the standard procedure," to present institutional knowledge, while employees might share their own practical insights during breaks, constructing a different type of operational knowledge. The analysis would investigate how these different discourses intersect and how knowledge is negotiated between formal rules and everyday practices. Example 5. Intertextuality in legal discourse. In legal discourse, judges construct knowledge through references to legal precedents. Discourse analysis of a judicial ruling might focus on how the judge cites previous cases to support the current decision, constructing knowledge through intertextuality. The analysis would explore how legal knowledge is built incrementally through these references, establishing continuity and legitimacy in the legal system. Challenges in analyzing knowledge construction through discourse. 1. Complexity of discursive practices. The process of knowledge construction is often complex, involving multiple layers of interaction, intertextuality, and power dynamics. Discourse analysts must account for these complexities, carefully examining how knowledge is constructed across different texts and contexts. 2. Power and marginalization. Knowledge construction is deeply intertwined with power, as certain voices are prioritized while others are marginalized. Discourse analysts must be sensitive to how language reinforces these power imbalances, particularly in settings where certain groups are excluded from the knowledge production process. 3. Context dependence. The construction of knowledge is context-dependent, shaped by cultural, institutional, and social factors. Discourse analysts must carefully consider these contextual influences when interpreting how knowledge is constructed and negotiated in different settings. Conclusion. The construction of knowledge is a dynamic, discursive process that takes place through language in various social, institutional, and cultural settings. Discourse analysis provides a powerful tool for understanding how knowledge is produced, validated, and shared, revealing the power dynamics, cultural values, and social practices that influence what is accepted as legitimate knowledge. Whether examining scientific discourse, classroom talk, media framing, or legal rulings, discourse analysis sheds light on how language shapes the construction of knowledge and the ways in which this process reflects broader social structures and ideologies. By understanding these dynamics, educators, policymakers, and professionals can foster more inclusive and equitable practices in knowledge production and dissemination. Frequently asked questions. What does construction of knowledge mean in discourse analysis? In discourse analysis, construction of knowledge refers to how meanings and understandings are actively created and negotiated through language and social interactions. It focuses on the idea that knowledge is not simply transferred but shaped by discourse, power dynamics, and cultural contexts. How do discursive practices contribute to knowledge production? Discursive practices, or the specific ways language is used within particular settings, help produce knowledge by setting norms for how ideas are presented and validated. For example, academic language in a classroom positions teachers as knowledge authorities, influencing students' understanding. Why are power relations important in the construction of knowledge? Power relations determine who has the authority to produce and validate knowledge, often privileging certain perspectives while marginalizing others. Discourse analysis examines how language reinforces these dynamics, such as through the dominance of expert language that may overshadow patient input in medical settings. What role does negotiation of meaning play in knowledge construction? Meaning is often negotiated in discourses where different perspectives meet, such as debates or discussions. Discourse analysis examines how these negotiations influence which ideas become dominant, revealing how language is used to assert, question, or reinforce particular viewpoints. How does intertextuality affect the construction of knowledge? Intertextuality, or the connection between texts, creates networks of knowledge by referencing previous ideas or research. Discourse analysis studies how these links build a foundation of accepted knowledge and how citation practices in academic texts position authors within scholarly communities. What is the impact of framing on knowledge construction? Framing shapes how knowledge is understood by highlighting certain aspects and downplaying others. For instance, framing economic inequality in terms of individual responsibility influences public perceptions by minimizing structural causes. Discourse analysis reveals how framing impacts what is accepted as legitimate knowledge. How does cultural and social context influence the construction of knowledge? The social and cultural context of discourse affects what knowledge is considered legitimate. Discourse analysis explores how cultural norms shape roles within settings like classrooms, where teachers are often seen as the sole knowledge providers, reflecting societal values around authority and expertise. In what ways is knowledge construction seen as a social practice? Knowledge is built through both formal and informal social practices, such as workplace conversations where employees share task-related knowledge. Discourse analysis investigates how these everyday exchanges create practical knowledge that might differ from formal training or manuals. What methods are commonly used to study knowledge construction in discourse analysis? Critical discourse analysis, CDA, examines how language in texts reflects power and ideologies in knowledge production. Intertextual analysis analyzes connections between texts to understand how knowledge networks are formed. Framing analysis studies how information presentation shapes understanding. Ethnographic discourse analysis observes how knowledge is built in specific social and cultural settings. What challenges arise in analyzing knowledge construction through discourse? Challenges include the complexity of interactions, the need to account for power imbalances that influence whose knowledge is valued, and the context dependence of knowledge. Discourse analysts must be attuned to these factors to accurately interpret how knowledge is produced.